In his 1995 novel Masquerade, Terry Pratchett put into words one of the fundamental truths of putting on a show. Opera happens because a number of things amazingly fail to go wrong. While the book itself is primarily concerned with opera, this line is true literally of any sort of live performance, whether it's opera, a circus, a play, or even live streaming.
Penis! Biscuits! Hold on. Monkeys!
A successful show done live only happens because any number of things that could go wrong don't. It's like editing, in a way. If you have a good live performance, the audience won't even notice all the things that are happening behind the scenes to make sure that what they see is seamless. And if everything does go wrong, well, that can be a disaster, especially if your live performance is a play. Props could go missing, actors miss their cues or forget their lines, elements of the set don't work like they're supposed to, and you can't just stop the performance to fix these issues and start again because it breaks the illusion for the audience, and the next thing you know, they're at the box office demanding their money back. The show must go on, as the old axiom puts it, and that means when you're doing things live, you have to put the show before anything else until you get through it. Unless the theater is actively falling down around you, you keep going, regardless of what's gone wrong on stage. Or even what may be going on backstage. Noises Off began life as a 1982 play written by Michael Frayn. It tells the story of a touring theater company staging a performance of Nothing On, a sex farce involving a lot of silly characters, a ridiculous amount of props, and a lot of doors slamming open and closed. The play is structured so that the audience only ever sees the first act of Nothing On, but in three distinct ways. First, at the last rehearsal before the opening night of the tour, then we see what happens backstage at a matinee taking place a few weeks later, and finally a truly disastrous performance a few weeks after that. Frayn got the idea while he was watching from the wings a production of the farce The Two of Us. According to Frayn, quote, "It was funnier from behind than in the front, and I thought that one day I must write a farce from behind," unquote. This led to the one-act play Exits in 1977, which Frayn later reworked into the full-length Noises Off. The play has been revived several times on both Broadway and the West End, and as time has gone on, Frayn has rewritten and updated the play several times, cutting dated references and adding or removing sequences and gags. And while the play is widely considered a classic in theatrical circles, it was largely unknown outside those circles until 1992, when Peter Bogdanovich, director of such films as The Last Picture Show, Paper Moon, and What's Up, Doc, directed a major film adaptation. The movie features an all-star cast, including Michael Caine, Carol Burnett, John Ritter, Christopher Reeve, Mary Lou Henner, Julie Hagerty, Mark Lynn Baker, Nicolette Sheridan, and Denholm Elliott. In fact, this was Elliott's last film role as he passed away later that same year. The film Americanizes the play, setting things up with the touring company bringing Nothing On to the US with an eventual run on Broadway. To facilitate this, there is a framing device added to the film which starts on the opening night of the show's Broadway run, and director Lloyd Fellows, played by Caine, is making a run of his own.
Mr. Fellows, is there anything wrong with your seat?
Yeah, it's facing the stage.
Side note, for some reason the movie version of the show swaps two of the characters' last names from the play, Lloyd being one of them. So if you're about to bring that up in the comments, I already have, so let's move on. As Lloyd runs from the theater, he sets up a flashback to the night before the opening of the tour. The show is set up in Des Moines, and we meet the company. Dottie Otley, played by Carol Burnett, Gary Lejeune, played by John Ritter, Brooke Ashton, played by Nicolette Sheridan, Freddie Dallas, played by Christopher Reeve, Belinda Blair, played by Mary Lou Henner, aging alcoholic actor Selsden Mowbray, played by Denholm Elliott, assistant stage manager Poppy Taylor, played by Julie Hagerty, and stage manager Tim Allgood, played by Mark Lynn Baker. As the cast run through their last rehearsal before opening, the production is besieged by a plethora of tiny annoyances. Dottie is confused about her blocking and is having trouble with the English accent she has to affect. A couple of the doors fail to work properly. Freddie is confused about his motivations. Tim hasn't slept in 2 days, and as time goes on, you start to realize there's several things going on behind the scenes between members of the company. Lloyd is carrying on affairs with both Poppy and Brooke, Gary and Dottie seem to be romantically involved, Belinda is a gossip, and everyone has to constantly figure out where Selsden is, as he tends to disappear somewhere to drink whenever no one is paying attention. Dialogue indicates the cast only had 2 weeks to rehearse, and it took 2 days to put the set up because the crew originally put it up incorrectly, hence why so many things seem to be going wrong. Which isn't helped by Lloyd's directing style involving heavy amounts of sarcasm or outright explosions of anger.
You carry those groceries into the study, Freddie, honey, because it's just slightly after midnight. And we're not going to be finished before we open tomorrow night. Correction. Before we open tonight!
During the rehearsal, Lloyd's two-timing becomes known, as does Gary and Dottie's relationship. We also learn the timetable of the tour, as well as some foreshadowing.
This is such a nice company to work with. It's such a happy company.
Wait till we get to Broadway in 6 months.
Wait till we get to Cleveland in 3 months.
By and large, the cast get through the rehearsal of the first act, despite a number of technical flaws, and Lloyd's voiceover tells us that the Des Moines shows were well received. The action shifts to several weeks later to a matinee in Miami Beach, and it seems during those weeks tensions have begun to mount between the members of the company. Dottie refuses to come out of her dressing room, Gary seems to be angry with Freddie for some reason, Poppy is preoccupied with problems of her own, and Lloyd arrives from New York where he's staging a production of Hamlet because Brooke is threatening to leave the tour. He also has no interest in any other drama going on.
I have just one afternoon while Hamlet sees his shrink and Ophelia starts divorce proceedings to cure Brooke of her nervous exhaustion. With no medical aids except a little whiskey, you've got the whiskey, a few flowers, you've got the money for the flowers, and a certain fading bedside manner.
Things escalate when Freddie mentions to Belinda that he and Dottie had spent the night talking in Dottie's hotel room the night before. This has caused Gary to get insanely jealous, and Belinda's right there with him.
She's not going to sink her teeth into you. I won't let her.
No, she couldn't have been nicer.
Because of all this drama, there's a lack of communication between Poppy and Tim, which results in them repeating the front of house calls several times.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please take your seats? The curtain will rise in 2 minutes.
Okay, Tim's already told him 2 minutes.
He's done 2 minutes? Ladies and gentlemen, will you please take your seats? The curtain will rise in 1 minute.
What the fuck is going on?
Eventually, everyone does take their places, but the grudges and drama are still bubbling right under the surface. What follows is, for me, the funniest part of the whole movie, as the cast enacts their grievances on each other during the performance, all while remaining silent. This would be bad enough, but things escalate as the cast's normal quirks, like Selsden trying to get the whiskey Lloyd gave to Tim, which the rest of the cast presumes to be Selsden's, and Brooke's general obliviousness and rigid adherence to the script, despite the fact that everyone is several pages further into the play than she is, make things even more chaotic.
Of course it's me! You put me in here in the dark with all black sheets and things.
For me, this section of the movie is the best because while you have John Ritter doing his by now legendary physical comedy throughout this portion, everybody else in the cast proves to be just as adept at this kind of humor. Also, the camera is positioned in several ways to create gags that you wouldn't necessarily be able to pull off in a stage version, such as Dottie trying to strangle Gary in the mirror of these shots while chaos with the other characters is also going on in the rest of the frame. And just to cap things off, Poppy drops a bombshell as the disaster of the first act comes to an end.
You just can't walk away from it this
like a
time.
good
Well,
old-fashioned
I'm sorry,
plate
but you've
of,
got to hear because
sardine.
I'm pregnant.
And curtain.
To round things out, we then jump ahead to the run in Cleveland, which, if you recall, is only 3 months after the rehearsal in Des Moines. And things have completely broken down. We aren't sure exactly what's been going on with the cast between Miami Beach and Cleveland, but we do hear something's going on backstage as the curtain rises.
Stay away from Lorraine. Stay away. Gary was using you.
As the play proceeds, we also find that all sense of professionalism has gone right out the window. Dottie can barely keep track of her lines, instead ad-libbing lines that seem to reflect that she and Belinda are now feuding backstage, presumably over Freddie.
We haven't been on the road for 3 months and already she's trying to kill me!
Things degenerate rapidly, with props being taken places they shouldn't be or being dropped on the floor, and the cast desperately trying to keep everything moving along, even when accidents backstage temporarily incapacitate other members of the cast.
You haven't hurt himself, have you?
Just leave everything to Squire, Hackerman, Poppy.
All right then.
Unfortunately, the attempts to ad-lib and cover for the mistakes aren't really successful, especially for Gary, because, as established in the Miami sequence, Brooke rigidly sticks to wherever she is in the script with no regard of what he or anyone else is saying.
In case somebody's looking at all this and thinking, my God. Okay, you take the, and I'll do
It's another bathroom.
box, bag,
Always trying to get me into bathroom.
bag, box.
And ultimately, the entire play breaks down when a pair of misplaced props causes Gary to trip and leads to what John Ritter once said was one of his most favorite falls he ever did on camera.
There's a perfectly rational explanation.
For this.
The cast tries to continue once it appears that Gary is at least okay, but if you're harboring the idea that maybe this show can be salvaged, this winds up happening.
What do I think?
I used to do banks.
When I remember, I used to do bullion vaults.
Somehow, the cast makes it to the end of the act, but the show is now completely in shambles. This is actually the point where the play ends, but we still need to resolve the framing story. Lloyd reluctantly returns to the theater, fully expecting the entire enterprise to have collapsed, and the audience demanding retribution.
Only one thing we're missing now, and that's a good old-fashioned plate of sardines.
So yeah, apparently whatever problems the cast had have been worked out, and the Broadway run of Nothing On seems to be off to a good start. As does something else.
I didn't tell you about this one. So what, you don't believe this? Let me tell you something. Neither do I.
Although things aren't entirely perfect. Noises Off received mixed reviews from critics, with most saying they thought the play was too much of a theater piece that it didn't translate well to film. It also failed at the box office, not even reaching $1 million at its opening weekend. Most don't seem to care for the happy ending either. Michael Frayn himself, however, did like the movie and thought the cast was perfect. And as time has gone on, it seems to have found an audience. Speaking as a former theater geek myself, I can vouch that, while exaggerated, a lot of the conflict between cast, crew, and the various technical things that can go wrong when mounting a show are present here, and if they happen while a performance is going on, you have to just try your damnedest to get through those problems, and hope you can get things back on track with minimal confusion for the audience. I meant to do that writ large for everybody to see. And Noises Off has a great cast superbly suited to this kind of lunacy. Everyone from comedy legends like Carol Burnett and John Ritter to respected actors like Michael Caine and Christopher Reeve dedicate themselves wholeheartedly to the insanity, and the result is a chaotic, hilarious comedy with likable characters, yes, even a total asshole like Lloyd, and a relatable theme of trying to keep it together when everything is crashing down around you. Everyone I have shown this movie to winds up loving it, and if you've never seen it before, go find out what it is you're missing, because the clips I've shown you here are just barely scratching the surface.
And God said, hold it! And they held it, and God saw that it was terrible. That's what it's all about. Doors and sardines. Getting on, getting off, getting the sardines on, getting the sardines off. That's farce. That's the theater. That's life.
Oh, God, Lloyd, you're so deep.